Hi, this is Braden Holtby.
Hey, this is Tanner the Bulldozer Bozer.
Hi, this is Brian Burke from Toronto, Ontario.
This is Daryl Sutter.
Hello, everyone. I'm Carly Agro from Sportsnet Central.
This is Jay Onright.
This is Quick Dick coming to you from Toughnell, Saskatchewan.
Hey, everybody. My name is Theo Fleury.
This is Kelly Rudy.
This is Corey Cross.
This is Wade Redden.
This is Jordan Tutu.
My name is Jim Pattison.
Hey, it's Ron McLean, Hockey Night in Canada and Rogers Hometown Hockey, and welcome to the Sean Newman Podcast.
Welcome to the podcast, folks. Happy Hump Day, Wednesday. Hope everybody's doing well. Let's get on to today's episode sponsors before we let you on to the festivities, all right? Jen Gilbert and team for over 45 years. Since 1976, the dedicated realtors of Coldwell Banker, Cityside Realty have served Lloydminster and the surrounding area. Star Power, that's what they're providing their clients with 7-day-a-week access. Service is a priority because they know big life decisions are not made during office hours. In the current environment, they've also adopted virtual reality. With this technology, they have an ability to show homes with live video walkthroughs of properties, and your transactions can be completed using emails and electronic signings. Coldwell Banker, Cityside Realty for everything real estate, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 780-875-3343. HSI Group, they're the local oil field burners and combustion experts that can help make sure you have a compliant system working for you. The team also offers security, surveillance, and automation products for residential, commercial, livestock, and agricultural applications. They use technology to give you peace of mind so you can focus on the things that truly matter. Stop in today at 3902 52nd Street or give Brody or Kim a call at 306-825-6310. T-Bar One Transport. Since 2002, for more than 19 years, the team at T-Bar One has offered excellent service, putting the community first. They're located in both Lloydminster and now Bonnyville. They can cover all your heavy haul needs. In their fleet, they have tank movers, 45-ton pickers, 1-tons, flat decks, Texas bed, winch truck, and highway tractors. Passed them by actually the Baker Hughes shop this morning. Guy was loaded up with a load of pipe. And they, folks, can cover all your heavy haul needs. Make sure you give boys at T-Bar One a call, 780-205-1709. Jim Spanrath and team over at Three Trees Tap and Kitchen. Did you know every week, if you follow their social media, they're giving away gift cards to one lucky follower? And I always got to bring up the growlers. I mean, you can get 4th Meridian, Ribstone Creek. It doesn't matter. Whatever they got on tap, you can get a growler filled there. Tell me somebody else that does this. I tell you what, that's a very cool little feature. And if you want to take the missus out, or Mr. out for that matter, to a nice meal, I highly suggest you book in advance because whatever Jim's doing over there with the team over at Three Trees is working. You need a reservation, give them a call, 780-874-7625. Crude Masters, since 2006, they have been an integral part of our community. They are a leader in the oil and gas industry, but I want to shine a light, as I always do, on what they do behind the scenes. Heath and Tracy continue to give and push forward different community initiatives, you know, whether it's the Health Foundation, minor hockey, golf tournaments that raise money for different initiatives. Crude Master is always thinking community first. Shout out to Heath and Tracy McDonald along with the team over at Crude Master. And where is the old SNP billboard gun? Have you found it yet? Well, let's see, maybe you can find it. It's not across from UFA anymore. And we're tucked in a nice little spot. Got to give a shout out to Read and Write and Mrs. Deanna Wanler, always making the podcast look sharp. And of course, Gartner Management is a Lloydminster-based company specializing in all types of rental properties to help meet your needs. Whether you're looking for a small office space or a 6,000 square foot commercial space, give Wade Gartner a call today, 780-808-5025. If you're heading into any of these businesses, make sure you let them know you heard about them from the podcast. Now let's get on to that T-Bar One tale of the tape. Born in 1948, he's a self-proclaimed redneck from central Alberta. Bootlegger, suicide, communism, pastor. He leaves it all on the table. I'm talking about Michael Stonhouse. So buckle up, because here we go. It is September 13th, 2020. Today I'm joined by Michael Stonhouse. So thank you, sir, for sitting in.
You're welcome.
Let's start with where you're originally from, because we were just chit-chatting about where you grew up, and you're not born and raised from Lloydminster, although you've been here a long time. Where are you originally from?
Well, I'm originally from Central Alberta, a place called Pine Lake, and for many people, that will ring a bell because I guess it's probably 15 years ago there was
I was just going to say a tornado.
terrible tornado, missed our farm by a mile, but it destroyed the trailer park of some good friends of mine. So I started life on a farm outside of Red Deer at Pine Lake. My grandfather had come to Central Alberta in 1903-04 and homesteaded east of Stettler in the Bothell-Gadsby area. And then after he was married, he moved to Pine Lake in 1920. So we're not really an old-timer there, but we've been there for a long time. So I'm a redneck Central Albertan, whether I like it or not. I come by it honestly. From there, my brother was a severe asthmatic, so we moved off the farm in 54.
What year were you born?
48.
48, okay.
Yeah, so I just turned
72.
I just turned 72.
Okay.
Yeah, only a few days ago.
Okay. Well, happy belated birthday then.
Thank you. So we moved to Medicine Hat. That's where I did most of my growing up years. Went to school there, and then went to university in Edmonton, and then worked as a social worker for 3 years, and then from there went to seminary, and then I've been ordained as a pastor for 43 years.
Well, let's back that up for a second.
Sure.
What was growing up in Medicine Hat like back in the late 50s, early 60s?
Well, Medicine Hat was like an oasis in the desert. It still is. I mean, it's everyone else can have storms and winter, and Medicine Hat actually often is free from all that. Actually, in some years they have a Christmas or a New Year's golf tournament kind of thing. So I gloried there. I lived just on the outskirts of town, so I spent tons of time out in the prairies, exploring, going up and down the coulees, building forts, rafting on the river, doing all those kind of things that country kids do, avoiding rattlesnakes if I could. I never actually saw one, but I knew where they lived. Digging up bison bones, looking for fossils. That's one of the primary fossil areas of the world. But I was sort of a nerdy kid, books and the outdoors, not really big into the social life, but very active in other things, community organizations, leadership roles kind of things. Very active in community service. My mom was a teacher and my dad was the municipal administrator for the rural areas around there. So it meant that I got away with nothing at all. I mean, when your mom is one of the local school marms, she would find out about my misdemeanors long before I even got home. And so I'd have to pay for it twice. I'd get the punishment at school and get it again at home. But I was somewhat of a community activist. I'd been involved in junior Kiwanis and Scouts and Red Cross Youth, and I was the community youth worker for a bit, working on the street with kids and trying to help kids. I was always really involved in. So in some ways, becoming a social worker and then a pastor was just a continuation of all the same, more of the same. Always active in the church, right from knee-high to a grasshopper.
So that's what drew you then to becoming a pastor?
Yeah, my parents were always very active, helping people, and I was as well, and very active in the church right from word get-go. And the incredible thing, though, interestingly enough, for the first 20-some years, Christianity was more theoretical for me than practical, because I didn't have a relationship with God, with Jesus. I didn't even know it was possible. So it was more sort of a cultural thing, an inherited thing that I got from my parents. So it wasn't until my early 20s, which is interesting because by then I was at university and managed with a lot of hard work to flunk out of university. Managed to flunk out so badly so that they told me I couldn't come back for at least 3 years.
What did you do?
Well, put it this way, I had a 3.3 average out of 9. And when you consider one of my marks was a 6, you can guess what some of the others were.
So what were you doing that...
Well, all sorts of stuff. I had extracurricular activities to boot. I was in a singing group. I was volunteering for different university organizations. I was active in the church. Oh, and I never mentioned I was one of the campus bootleggers.
A campus bootlegger?
Oh, yeah, because I was of age and most of the guys in residence weren't. And so I supplied booze for them every Friday and Saturday night. At cost, mind you. I wasn't making a profit out of it, but and I was drinking too. I mean that was, when I had to getting booze for other guys, I had to get some for myself too. I mean, so.
So you partied your university degree? Yeah. Well, not degree. You partied so hard that essentially they asked you to leave.
Yeah. So. That was the year I was supposed to graduate. That was my third year of university. So they told me...
Your third year of university, you went down the road of not showing up to classes or what have you.
Yeah, and yeah.
What was it about your third year? I would think by your third year, it'd be the opposite way.
Well, it was sort of going downhill. I mean... Well, and that was my first year in residence, and so here I am, buddy with all the guys, and basically one of my problems was I was having to come to terms with myself, and I didn't like what I saw. So drinking and being a good old boy was a way of escaping, and so was all the my activities that I was involved in. If you're busy, you don't have to look at yourself.
What was it about looking at yourself that you didn't like?
Oh, well, I did a pretty good job of screwing things up. As a teenager, I tried committing suicide a couple times, Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I hate to pry, but why, what got you to that point?
Well, I shared this actually in my sermon today is, for the longest time, I thought you had to, with my parents, I thought I had needed to earn their love. And I thought the same thing with God, that I needed to earn God's love because my parents were old style English. Praise was sort of few and far between. It was, every time was, you could have done better. Or what? If I came home with a 95%, they'd say, well, where did the other 5% go? And my younger brother, he was always smarter than I was. So why can't you be like your brother? So my sense was, I never measured up. I was never good enough. I was always screwing up in some way or another. That after a while sort of takes its toll. And so I was convinced that I was a screw up, that I was always making a mess of something or other. And, nothing, totally big, but I mean, relationships would go sour or I'd mess up on this or that. And I was my worst critic. So...
Yeah, but to try and take your life because like that.
Yeah.
Once again, I have a hard time getting to that. Like to me, that seems like 0 to 100 million miles an hour to go from living your life to trying to end it, I guess.
Well, it's I mean, I've over the years as a pastor, even as a social worker, I've counseled lots of people who were suicidal. and it's where you feel totally alone, where you don't think you've got any resources, and the only way out, the only light at the end of the tunnel, is to take your own life. And that's how people who are suicidal often feel, is that that's the only way out. I mean, it's sick, it's stupid, but that's the reality. And a sad thing is, I mean, for me, it was somewhat continuing for a while, but I mean, for some people, it's just a spur of the moment thing. But sadly, a spur of the moment thing can be deadly, For me, there was sort of a self-hatred that was there for quite a while, but fortunately, I got irritated with myself. Even, after I failed at it, I said, you can't even do that right. How's that for a perverse sense of humor? But, yeah.
So then, what changes? What you deal with this for obviously quite a few years.
Yeah. So what changed was basically, several things. One was when I moved to Edmonton, I became involved in a singing group, and one of the things that I realized, I mean, in Medicine Hat, I was sort of an outsider. I was this community involved guy, but I wasn't really involved socially very much. I wasn't dating. I didn't have a girlfriend, any of that kind of stuff. And in Medicine Hat at the time, like a lot of small communities, coupling up happened really early. I don't know what your hometown was like, but ours, by grade 7, you were going steady, and that's pretty well defined you. If you didn't have a girlfriend or a boyfriend, then you were sort of a loser. And that's, So anyway, I came to Edmonton, went to university, and found a group of people that really accepted me.
Like-minded people.
Yeah, like-minded people. And furthermore, were sort of community-minded who wanted to make a difference in the world. So that was sort of the start of things. And then from there, I sort of graduated. Well, I mean, it was partway through that when I flunked out of university. And as they say in AA, I realized I was powerless to help myself, that I needed help. And so I discovered God, or he discovered me. And that made all the difference in the world. I realized that, hey, you're a somebody in God's eyes, that you're valued, that you're precious, that you don't have to perform. Even if you blow it, you're still valued by God. And that was like a total revelation for me. I'd never encountered that before. And so from there, I mean, I've been living that that was back in 1970. So,
So you flunk out of university.
Mm-hmm.
And then you just walk into the church one day and you just start break that down a little bit better.
So I flunked out of university, worked at various jobs, then 3 years later went back. But meanwhile, by the way, I had my conversion and God had done lots of work in me. When I flunked out, they said, you can't come back for at least 3 years, and before you can come back, you're going to have to take some psychological testing because we think you're all screwed up. You have to see a shrink, and you'll have to take some academic testing to see whether you are really fit for university or not. So anyway, so I came back, did all that stuff, and they said, well, we don't see no reason why you shouldn't do well. So I finished my degree, and then worked as a social worker for 3 years, and then went on and got a master's degree. So in spite of flunking out of university, I went on to do some pretty good stuff.
You say in the 3 years you have your conversion.
Mm-hmm.
You grew up going to church.
Yeah.
And heavily involved in church, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Was it always Anglican?
Yeah, it was, yeah. Though in Edmonton, when I was involved there, it was Anglican and Pentecostal. I went to both churches.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so in the first 20-some years of your life,
Mm-hmm.
it was just kind of showing up, reading the book, and
Well, it was. I kept on thinking, feeling, especially as a teenager, I'd sit in church and say, there's something they're not talking about, something that is sort of the background, but they're not spelling it out. And what I eventually realized was that was Jesus, and that was a relationship with Jesus. But the assumption was, and this is actually an assumption in the Anglican Church, it's been there right from the beginning. The assumption in the Anglican Church is that everyone who goes to church knows Jesus, has a relationship with God. That's the assumption. It goes right back to the Reformation, was that, that you take that for granted. Well, by the time that got to me, it wasn't being spelled out. You couldn't take it for granted. And so there was lots of people who were basically cultural Christians. They were Christians because that was their family background. Heritage, yeah. So it's something you grew up with, but unfortunately for many people, they just grew out of as well, because it wasn't real to you. In fact, one of the Roman Catholic popes said, we've made a good job of making people Catholic, but not a good job of making them Christians. Sadly to say, the church isn't what saves you. The church can be an absolute, I was going to say asshole, but it can be a real bugger. It can be, it can be the worst place. I mean, I've worked for them for many years, so I know. So it's not the church that saves you. It's God or it's Jesus. But I grew up it was important to me. It was part of my life, part of my family upbringing, but it wasn't real. I kept on thinking, there's something more to this. It's like, well, you play hockey, right?
yeah.
So it's like saying, okay, there's those guys out there skating, but there obviously is a coach somewhere. They wouldn't know how to make all their scoring plays and do so well if there wasn't someone coaching them and sort of orchestrating the game. Well, so I was playing the game, but I didn't know who the coach was. And a coach can make all the difference in the world, whether you do, play the game well or not, and well, in fact, whether you even want to play the game. So for me, it was I didn't know the coach. I didn't have a relationship with the coach, and so he wasn't in my life orchestrating things, directing things,
So then, I don't know how to phrase this. So then you figure this out. What is the moment then that changes things?
Well,
is there such a thing?
Yeah, well, there was two things. One was when I was with the singing group, living in a co-op house with 8 other guys, and one of the guys, a guy by the name of Rolf, had, by society standards, everything going for him. Blonde, blue-eyed, 6'3", well off, a hit with the girls, played lead guitar in our singing group, working on a degree in chemistry.
He's got it made.
He's got it made. But inside, he was like a coiled spring. He was one of my roommates, and you could tell that inside he was not at peace. He was, just ready to poof. Anyway, he went away for a few weeks on a construction job and came back, and I could tell something was different. He was at peace. And I said, Rolf, what happened? And he said, it's Jesus. I've given him my life. He didn't even have to say it because I could tell there was such a change in his life. So that was one big thing, and so several nights later, we had a It was late at night. We'd been out sitting on the doorstep talking. It was a good old-fashioned prairie thunderstorm. And the thunderstorm, the clouds went away and the stars came out. And I had a thought, well, the stars are all there. I said, the thought I had was my life was like that thunderstorm, noise, bang, confusion. But then the stars came out and I realized, the stars are so precise that even mariners, can plot their way by it. And the thought came to me, well, that's because God's in control. And the thought came to me was, yeah, your life could be like that if God was control. But unlike the stars, you have to let God do that. And so right there, this was in June of 1970, I said, okay, God, whoever you are, I want you to take over. So that was a big change, and an interesting thing.
Oh no, sorry. So the interesting thing is, sorry, I'm not going to cut you off. Carry on.
So there wasn't a big sort of like flash of something inside, flash of light inside or warm feeling or anything like that. But I just felt that everything was okay. That, here I was, I had flunked out of university, I had a bunch of part-time jobs, but wasn't really going anywhere very fast. Just felt everything's okay. I'm looked after. It's sort of the image I love is when my kids were little, and is how I would pick them up and they would just fall asleep. They'd be totally at peace because, okay, here's Dad. Everything's okay. And that's how I felt, that everything's okay. I'm looked after. So that was in June of 1970. Then the next step was later that fall is here I was, okay, I've given my life over to God, over to Jesus, and so I'm trying to live the Christian life. And sometimes doing pretty miserably at it. By then, I'm a social worker, and that was really difficult because I was working. It started off in juvenile probation with a bunch of really stupid kids, juvenile delinquents. That was really trying. And then from there, I went into family services. So I dealt with suicides and battered children and
just the ugly side of the world.
Oh yeah. So I really had issues, really problems. Here I am. Sure, I've worked on the streets with kids, but this is a totally different thing. So talk about a baptism by fire. So I really found that life was like a roller coaster, that at times I was doing great and times I was not. But basically, I was trying to live the Christian life in my own stream, in my own power, which is really stupid because you're trying to be like God. Well, who can be like God without God's power? Anyway, in the fall of 70, I discovered the what they call the infilling of the Holy Spirit, which is basically asking God's Holy Spirit to fill you and work through you. And that made total difference to the point where people actually at work could notice a change in my life, a change in the sense, especially a change in the confidence I had, that I wasn't intimidated by the boss. I wasn't intimidated by the problems. I had a new sense of courage, of confidence, that kind of thing. And then the third part was I ended up getting pneumonia about 2.5 years into this. Ended up in hospital in and out for 9 weeks. When I got out, well, I'll give you background a little bit. While I was there lying in bed in the hospital, I said to the Lord, by the way, this kind of prayer isn't necessarily the way to go, but anyway, I said, God, I'm not sure that this is what I'm supposed to continue doing, so I'd really like a sign whether I continue this or not. And I'd like a sign by Easter, please. So guess what? I returned to work, and I think it was 3 weeks before Easter, I'm called into my boss's office, and he says, "Well, Michael, you're a good social worker. You do a good job. You're good with the clients and with your fellow workers, but your administration stinks. We really think that you should look for another job." Okay, well, I should have seen that coming anyway. But then he goes on and says, "We really think that you should enter the ministry." I mean, here is this secular guy that, as far as I knew, didn't have a spiritual bone in his body, telling me that I should be a minister. Like, I'm wondering, where in the world did this come from? And then he went on and he says, "Oh, and furthermore, we know that you need to go back and finish your degree before you go to seminary. So we're letting you go as a caseworker, but we want you to continue on until the end of the summer as our intake worker." So basically, I was being fired but given a new job simultaneously. So for the next 3 or 4 months, I continued on in the same office, but as the intake worker instead of a caseworker. I mean, how many bosses fire you? And so that was one sort of interesting sign. I go in to see my bishop, and when I made his appointment with him, this is the Bishop of Edmonton. I didn't tell him why I wanted to see him. So his secretary ushers me into his office, and so he says, "Well, Michael, what can I do for you?" And I said, "Well, sir, I think God is calling me into the ministry." And he stands there, we haven't even sat down yet, and starts laughing his head off. I'm thinking, so what's so funny about that? I mean, that's sort of intimidating, right? So when he quit laughing, he said, "Well, Michael, I've been thinking that for years, and just was wondering what was taking you so long." I mean, first of all, my boss, who's a former RCMP commissioner, who doesn't have a spiritual bone in his body, thinking I should be a minister, and now the bishop, who's known me for years, thinking I should be a minister. I'm thinking, okay, boss, are you telling me something here? So that was, that's where it,
That's where it starts.
Yeah. So went on, finished my first degree, got my master's degree, and then 43 years of ordained ministry.
Going back to you saying people saw a change in you.
Mm-hmm.
Would it be safe to say up until that point you were very conflicted inside and probably very preoccupied?
Yeah. Well, and scared of my own shadow in some ways. That authority figures, especially people like bosses, that scared the wits out of me. So I was, well, my father had been a very dominant person, and I was afraid of my father. I mean, so it wasn't sort of natural that I would be afraid of people like that. Yeah, so
the biggest change then people saw in you is almost, you call it, I'm trying to paraphrase it now, giving your life to Jesus. And it lets go all the tension that you've been holding on to for a very long time.
Yeah.
That's what they see.
Yeah, letting go of the tension and getting a new confidence that I'd never had before. I mean, even though I had in school and in community when I was growing up, I had positions of leadership in organizations. I mean, in some ways that was easy because an organization, they're sort of like-minded people. They're sort of on your wavelength. But if I had to stand up in front of my class, that was hell. If I had to stand up and make a presentation in front of class, that was hell.
And then you'd spend 43 years of your life doing just that, right?
Well, that's right. I mean, that's the weird thing is because, I mean, not just standing up, in a pulpit or that kind of thing, but, going to city council and making a presentation before the mayor and council, and sometimes really taking them to task for things. I'm chair of the board for the men's shelter, so I'm doing advocating for the homeless and that kind of thing. So that's not always a popular type thing. So yeah, so from being the shy little guy in school to this, like,
Confidence.
yeah, but it's quite a change.
Yeah, I find it interesting going from suicide to where you're standing in front of a congregation talking to people.
Yeah.
That is quite a change.
Yeah.
When do you meet your wife in all this?
Well, I'll back my present relationship. We're engaged, but we're not married yet.
Okay.
Anyway, my first wife, I'm divorced. We met at seminary back in Toronto, and so actually she was a Baptist Pentecostal. She eventually became an Anglican priest herself, and we raised 3 kids. Lived in all sorts of different places over the years, but then that went downhill back in late of 2005, and we were divorced in 2006. And then my present spouse, I've known her for years, but she was actually a member of my church when I've retired once, and before I retired, she was a member of my church. Now she goes to a different church, but so we've only been together for just over a year.
You strike me as an interesting fellow, and I mean that as you come in, you're a pastor, you wear the garb, you come in, you talk about Jesus, you talk about all these things, and I grew up going to church, and that's like you're over here on this one line, and then on the flip side, you've tried committing suicide, you've drank, you've had divorce, you've had some tough things go through life.
Mm-hmm.
And you talk so openly about it. I find that very, I don't know, is refreshing the word?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's one of the things, I guess that's one of the things also why the Christianity of my childhood, one of the things I didn't like, whereas the Christianity that I came into, in my early 20s, was a very practical Christianity. That dealt with real life. And by the way, and that, I mean, to me, being a social worker, that would fit right into it. I mean, if my faith didn't have something to help me and help others as a social worker, I mean, what good is it? And likewise now, back when I was in Central Alberta, I was in 2 different communities during 2 of the farm crises. Having a faith that meant something to guys who are losing their farms or losing their businesses. I mean, if it doesn't relate, who cares? Who wants it? In one parish, I probably had 3 or 4 suicides a year. If your faith doesn't help you in that in some ways, again, who cares? So, to me, all the faith stuff and the Jesus and the Bible and that kind of thing needs to relate to real life. And so to me, the 2 go together, being real about your life and having that connect up to God. To me, they need to go together, and to be honest, I mean, one reason I don't mind sharing it is that that's a help to people. I remember dealing with a guy. He was in the psychiatric ward of the Calgary General Hospital, and he had tried committing suicide, and so the ward nurses asked if I would go in to see him. So I go in to see him, and he says, I don't want to see any old, well, I won't use the words he used quite. I don't want to see any old pastor. You don't have a clue what I'm going through. And I said, you're right. I can't be in your skin. I probably don't have the foggiest notion of what you're going through. But let me tell you a story. Okay. So I told him my story of having tried to commit suicide and how I felt that way, felt at that time. And he just looked at me, sort of dumb look. He says, how do you know that? How do you know how I'm feeling like that? I said, because I've been there. Well, I mean, that makes all the difference in the world. Hearing your story or something like your story from someone else, it means it connects up. It helps. And that's what, I work with Alcoholics Anonymous, something they call fifth steps. It's where the folks go and share something about their lives. Well, it's that sharing that, that's one of the great things about the 12-step programs is you have folks, guys and gals, who are being real about what they've been through. And that helps each other.
Well, I bring it back. Maybe I've never paid attention enough too. That can be put on me. But I like how you talk about your childhood Christianity growing up. They paint it in a certain light. It's almost perfection. And you can't, life isn't perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And not even remotely close.
Yeah.
And what you're talking about is, that's life.
Yeah, yeah.
That's very interesting. So you become a pastor in order to essentially carry on what you're doing as a social worker, or what else is to try and help people.
Yep, yeah, yeah.
So for 43 years then, what sticks out as, I don't know if it's high times or good memories or just meaningful memories. What are something that over your time doing what you do, what's something that sticks out?
Well, I guess there's all sorts of things. So I'll give you sort of an idea of sort of where that went. I started off in Calgary as an assistant in a church, in a suburban church, and then I went to Central Alberta and had 5 churches, 11 communities spread over 2,300 square miles, so 3 Hills area. And then from there to Innisfil, Bowden, outside of Red Deer. Then to an inner city parish in Saskatoon. And then to here. So I've been around. So I basically, and then when I was a student minister, I was involved in a very large rural parish in southern Saskatchewan, and then in a humongous downtown parish in Toronto. So I've been virtually every kind of parish situation you could ever think of. So all sorts of sort of varied stuff. So over the years I've done tons of youth work with kids, with young people, and glad to see a number of them go on to wonderful careers, some of them even in the church. So I've had probably 4 or 5 kids that have become pastors. So that's been really quite gratifying. I've done all sorts of community work, particularly, anything from, I served in the Ag Society in one community and helped design a new community center. Done all sorts of, in another community, I was one of the spark plugs for an environmental program. Basically cut down the amount of household waste by about 2/3 in 3 years. completely redid the whole garbage system for the community. Done a bunch of stuff to do with local history. Done a lot of advocacy work, sometimes for farmers, now for homeless. Basically sort of where the need was and where God seemed to be calling me at the time. Here in Lloydminster, for instance, the work with the men's shelter and the homeless was not sort of my choice. We found, so my church is right across from the May Theatre downtown. Well, we found people sleeping in our garbage shed and sleeping under the wheelchair ramp in the middle of November. And so I went around downtown and said, is this a problem or is it just something that happens at the church? And so the furniture people, for instance, where Digital Connections is now, they said, oh yeah, we have guys coming in here and they haven't slept a wink, and so we have to get rid of them, but they end up, we find them fast asleep on our mattresses, our beds. And all sorts of people said, yeah, we have homeless here all the time. And so basically the whole thing, I started with the homeless because I didn't want people freezing to death. So it wasn't very altruistic. It was just that I wasn't interested in having that on my hands. So that's how I got involved in the men's shelter and to continue to be involved. But, that was a need that I saw. And, oh, by the way, after sort of polling people, I decided, well, I'll call a community meeting to talk about this. This was in June of 2007. Was it 2008? So I call a meeting, and much to my amazement, there's over 24 people there. People, SNP, social services, city, Lloydminster, public library, downtown office, downtown businesses, And this is with a week's notice or 2 weeks' notice type of thing. All these people show up for this meeting. Obviously there's a need and an interest. So I've been at this now for 8 years, more than 8 years now. Yeah. But it's basically where, there's a need and something that I feel called to. And then, so it's varied from community to community. In one community, when in Ishill Bowden, when people were losing their farms, it was a sort of advocacy on their behalf, telling their story and that kind of thing. It varies. It's been really varied over the years, and plus the work that happens right in the church of ministering to people and helping them and nourishing them and that kind of thing.
You've been then all over Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Are people all the same, or does it change from rural to urban to Saskatchewan to Manitoba to Ontario?
I would say people are all the same in terms of their strengths and weaknesses, in terms of their needs, their aspirations, things like that. Now, the particular cultural setting and the way that that's shaped may be quite different. So I'll give you an example. There's a fellow by the name of James Gray who wrote, I think it's called The Winter Years. It's about the Depression on the prairies. And he describes the difference between Alberta and Saskatchewan. And when I read that, I said, yeah. So he says, okay, so number one, you notice that Alberta is more redneck and more sort of questioning whether they really like Ottawa or Toronto. He says there's a good reason for that, because with the preferential freight rates, Alberta got shafted all the time. Maybe, Saskatchewan would get shafted, but Alberta even more so because they were the end of the line. So if the freight rates were orchestrated to the benefit of central Alberta, like Ontario, in other words, Alberta got it worse than anybody else. So no wonder Alberta does not like Ottawa. He says it's historical. There's a good reason. It's part of culture. Plus, in Alberta had more of an influx of people from Utah and various other places, Montana and such from the States. So you had a different influx of settlers, So the tenor of Alberta is different. He says, and then on top of that, so he says Alberta is naturally, according to their history and culture, sort of more redneck, more their own guys, Mr. Trudeau, past or present, too bad, type of thing. He says, if you look at Saskatchewan lived through the Depression, and if it hadn't been for cooperating together and working together, they would not have survived. Because by the time the Depression hit southern Alberta, like Medicine Hat, etc., the Palliser Triangle, those farmland, were taken out of commission. And so the Dirty 30s never affected them like it did Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan got the brunt of it. And so basically, Saskatchewan saw their topsoil, their livelihood drift eastward. Alberta never got that like that. And so, one of the RMs in southern Saskatchewan, there was not one single person, one person from the whole county council or RM council, only one person that wasn't on the dole, that wasn't on relief. I mean, that's how widespread it was. It got to the point where to help people to survive that had no livelihood because their farm was gone, they would be allowed one milk cow. If they had 2 milk cows, they had to sell one off. But the government would provide the feed and the water for the one milk cow, so they had milk for the, so if it hadn't been for the government and the co-ops and working together, it wouldn't have survived. So the whole sort of socialist or cooperative feeling of Saskatchewan, there's a good reason for it, because it's a different set of circumstances. But in terms of the needs and aspirations of people, they're the same.
Doesn't matter if you're from Saskatchewan, Alberta, Ontario.
No. I mean, my youngest son is a pastor in Toronto, and so same place. And then on my mom's side, the family comes from Nova Scotia. So they're the same. I mean, part of them are up coast fishermen, and they could do pretty well in an oil community. Well, not for oil, but I mean, they're hard living, hard drinking. They're good old boys. They instead of breakfast, they have whiskey.
Have you always enjoyed this area then?
Yeah.
Something about Lloydminster?
Yeah. I came in 2007, and and actually, a funny thing is, people said, after Saskatoon, isn't this sort of a downer? And I said, no, actually, I grew up in Medicine Hat when it was about this size, and so community where you know people and are known by people, and where you can make a difference, where you can have a sense of belonging. I mean, that's what I'm used to. So, I like Lloyd, and I'm used to sort of redneck Central Alberta. I mean, this feels very much at home, and I say to my boys, I said, well, the first Christmas I was here. I said on my little Christmas notes, I said, from a genuine borderline case. And they said, Dad, we've known that for years. This sort of perverse sense of humor we have around here. Yeah. So, I enjoy it. Yeah.
Where did you raise your kids then?
In mostly, a little bit in Elnora and Innisfail, but mostly Saskatoon.
So you only spent a little bit of time out east then, and that was when you were younger then?
That's when I was in seminary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What were some of the things that you instilled in your children growing up that maybe, from your own childhood you maybe tried to steer away from?
Well, one thing was that they were valued as individuals. I mean, none of them were raised with the idea that they had to be like their brothers or like anyone else. That they were individuals, that they were valued for who they were as individuals. And so the three of them are quite different, different personalities, but they're strong. They have great careers. So that's one thing that was instilled in them. A naturalness with people. All three were raised, with lots of people, and the youngest, in fact, the pastor was basically raised by the church, but all of them always had people around, so they're naturals with people, and part of that is that they're all have the gift of the gab. I wonder how that could happen. So Alan, the eldest, is a lawyer, specializes in medical law. The next one, David, is a teacher and artist. And then the youngest is a former actor and pastor. So all of them are supremely self-confident. So all of them are good with people, good speakers. Yeah, poor kids. All of them have a sense of humor and are down to earth and well-grounded,
What does a pastor who's a father worry about for his kids? What were your stresses growing up, or having them grow up?
Well, they were way smarter than me.
Way smarter than you. How so?
Well, all of them drink. I don't, but they all drink. But they are much wiser than than I ever was. They would organize, especially Alan and David would organize pub crawls. So they would start at Amigo. No, it wasn't Amigos. It was at the top of the Broadway Bridge. Do you know Saskatoon?
Well, I do know Saskatoon.
Top of the Broadway Bridge. So they started a pub there, and then go down Broadway to 8th Street, and then work along 8th Street all the way to McKercher, to Thomas Cook. And so the idea was you had to have a drink at each one. But
we've all been there before.
They'd end up at Thomas Cook because that was only 3 doors from our house. So no drinking and driving there. They would just mosey along.
And what did you think of that?
I thought, well, that's responsible. They're in bad maybe worse for wear in the morning, but it's responsible. And not only that, David never told me about this, but there was one of the guys that was really worse for wear, and it was a cold night, a winter night. Well, he went and carried his friend all the way home to his place, got the key out of his pocket, opened the door, and carried him into his bed and laid him down on his bed. This friend, if he had to manage on his own, would have never survived. And that David didn't tell me about it. Someone else told me about it. Or an instance of Alan, the eldest. He comes home with 2 girls. How many of us could date 2 girls? Anyway, so he's got 2 girls. That's his date, his 2 girls. So they're off to a party. Alan's off to a party with 2 girls. Goes to the party. Half an hour later or less, he and the 2 girls are back. They've picked up a pizza, and they're going to watch movies together. And I look at Alan and I said, so what's up? Well, the party was a bunch of losers. They were all taking drugs. We decided we didn't want any part of that, so we decided to come back here and have our own party. Good kid, eh? I mean, I think that's pretty sensible. Yeah. So, I mean, they've made some really sensible life choices. I mean, well, both Alan and Philip were senior watch at their high school, in other words, school president. I mean, I think that has to be some kind of record, too, from a family. But all of them took, prominent roles in school affairs. Alan, when he left high school, he was the top scorer for both football and basketball for his entire school. So he was scouted by the Hilltops for football. Doug Sargent wanted him, and he was scouted by the U of S for the Huskies for both basketball and football. And he turned them down. And I'm thinking, what? What kind of idiot are you? You're getting scouted by the Huskies. Who knows where this might go? The Hilltops. I mean, the Hilltops are a really good football team. He says, Dad, high school was a piece of cake, but university won't be like that. I'm going to need to study. Well, he did. He came out, so he's got 2 degrees. His first degree was a double honors major in environmental studies and land use and biology. So he comes out of his science degree with the top marks for the entire, well, then he applies for law school and has the top marks for all of Saskatchewan going into law school. This is from the son of a guy who flunked out of university. I think, whoa! I mean, and then when he finishes law school, he gets scouted by the top 3 law firms of Saskatoon. I mean, top 3 all wanting him to article with them.
So you're a proud dad.
Yeah, I mean, they must have done something right. Yeah, so.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So, yeah, well, and
did you take the same approach with your children as you, I assume, take with your congregation? Did you try and hide away some of the blemishes of your life, or were you this open with your kids as well?
No, tell it like it is. Yeah.
It is very refreshing. It's very interesting. I probably won't get over this fact all day long.
Well, I mean, and actually, and I don't bring it in all the time, but I use that in my sermons. I mean, well, I mean, like a sermon not that long ago, I said, do any of you have a problem like I have? Do you ever feel like you just write some people off? That, yeah, we're all supposed to be made in the image of God, but there's some people that you really have trouble with. I mean, good example is I was just leaving the church. Today was our first day back in person, and so I'm carrying my stuff out to the car, and this street person sees me and starts to walk over, and I think I'm hoping she's drunk, but anyway, that would excuse it maybe. Anyway, he says, how did she put it nicely? Well, I can't say how. She says, "Curse you, fucking bastard! I know what you did to my mother, and I don't have a thing to do with you, and more of the same." I'm thinking, what in the world? Who are? Well, I know who she is, but I mean, I don't have a clue what she's talking about. And she had been sort of camped out in front of the post office, and she launches on this. She's very belligerent, aggressive woman, and I'm thinking, what in the world is that about? And I walk away and I'm thinking, okay, you go back. I don't want to deal with you. You can go somewhere hot and bothered if you want. Because, and so sometimes I share that kind of stuff. I said, do you have people that you have trouble with? I mean, don't we all have that? I mean, and I see people nodding, saying, yeah, okay, so, and the sense is, okay, what do we do about that? How do you handle that? Nothing like being real.
So how do you handle that?
Well, in this lady's case, she's a real interesting sort. Take her in small doses, very small if I can. Let her know where the boundaries are. Never... Usually try to have someone else there as a witness. Usually never always protect my back, because knowing her, she probably has a knife and probably would use it. I know that she has assaulted people and hurt them. So I will, I face her. Okay, I don't give in to her, and I tell her what's what, but at the same time, I don't give her so I give her a certain amount of space, but I don't back off, but at the same time.
So what are you trying to do? Are you trying to let her know that?
I'm trying to let her know, like, okay, you are accepted, you are cared for, but there's a limit, and you can't get away with everything or anything. So she comes to our men's shelter, comes to the drop-in, and she may be barred from both right now. I don't know. But so, yes, we value you as a person, but you can't do everything you want. You may like to manipulate people and screw them around and muck up people's lives, but you're not doing it here. So to me, having some healthy boundaries is part of respecting people, valuing people. So, but she's not a person who, she's not used to that. So it's a hard one. She's a real BICCH. But
did a pastor just spell out a bitch on
She is, for sure. But I've worked on the streets in Medicine Hat. I've worked as a social worker. My parish in Saskatoon was an inner city church, as is here. You're used to people like that. So that difficult balance between caring for them and not being manipulated or taken advantage of or injured, or it's a difficult one. But we all have troublesome people in our lives.
Yes. Well, there's billions of people on the planet.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of great ones, but there's a lot of not so great ones.
Well, Carol and I have this fun thing. You probably know many of the people that we talk about, because she says, "Oh yeah, they were quite a drinking crowd when they were younger." Yeah. Remember one of them, Dad used to let him stay at our place because he had sort of drift in late at night and be rather worse for wear, and Dad would decide that he really needed a place to spend the night. So, and I said, yeah, that sounds pretty normal.
You gotta go through an age there where you explore things.
Yeah.
And to hear that a pastor's done the same things, although should not surprise anyone.
Yeah. Well, it was the number of years ago, I can't remember if it was which one of the media, local media, interviewed off the record 3 of us pastors, and after hearing something about our stories, the reporter said, "I guess that sort of says that God can use anyone." And we said, "Yep, that's exactly the point. God can use anyone." You know. So and at that point, well, I mean, I told them a bit about social work, flunking out, suicidal. One thing I haven't told you about is also I had a spell as a communist of the worst sort.
I don't know what that means, so you best explain.
So this is when I first got to university in Edmonton. This is the late 60s, and so you had all sorts of student revolts and demonstrations and things like that. And the leader of it was the group that was behind it was something called SDU, Students for Democratic University. So it's like the SDS in the States. It was related to the Black Panthers and all sorts of people like that.
Okay.
So it was a communist front organization. It was basically Trotskyist. I don't know if you know communism.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it was a Trotskyist organization, and what they were agitating for was more student rights, and really what they were agitating for was very, very valid, because there was some things that were happening to students that were not good at all.
Such as?
So, for instance, university classes are supposed to be places. I mean, I'm not sure if this is still true, but places of inquiry where you could ask questions and raise issues and that kind of thing. Well, that was being nipped in the bud. Well, actually worse than being nipped in the bud. If you were a troublemaker and raised the wrong kind of questions in class, you were reported. What you said and did would be in your records, your student records, and that ended up being shared with not just with the authorities, but with future employers. And so if you asked the wrong kind of questions, that would be told to your employer. So, genuine questions that you might have as a student would be used against you. We also knew that the RCMP, this was during the Eberhard regime, that there was RCMP in classes watching students, taking notes of who was a troublemaker.
And what is a troublemaker?
Someone who raises the wrong kind of questions.
Okay, next question. What is the wrong question?
Things that question authority, question the way things are done. Yeah. Well, and one of the other things was...
But go back to this for a second here. I'm having a question of authority, like what? Like...
Well, see, another thing this is related to it is at that time there would be student council, but there was no students on the Senate, no student representatives on any decision-making bodies of the university. So even if you were a grad student, there wasn't representation on any of the on any of the government body or university bodies. So in other words, decisions were being made for students without any input from the students.
Okay.
So I know, at Medicine Hat College, where my brother went, he was the very first student ever to be on the board of governors for the
college.
But that was unheard of back then. The idea that students might have a voice and want to have a voice and have a valued voice was unheard of. The idea that students might need to be heard from was unheard of. So what essentially nipped the revolution in the bud was that we got a new principal or a new president of the university who sat down with the students, and I remember because I was in the room, sat down with the university students and said, okay, I've got 3 hours right now. I want to hear what you have to say, and if that's not enough time, then come back, we'll have some more. So tell me what's wrong and what we can do about it, and I'll take notes, and we'll go from there. And if you don't see me doing it, come back and see me again. I mean, the students were dumbfounded. They'd never had anyone like that. I think that was Max Wyman. They'd never had anything like that. They'd never been treated with that kind of respect before. Anyway, so anyway, I was involved in the leadership of this group. But then, interestingly, and basically, well, there was two things that turned me away from that. Well, three things actually. So first was the Trotskyist idea, as opposed to Bolshevik, is that you have revolution everywhere at once. That you basically destroy the old to rebuild the new. Well, that's only taken place once, and that was the Pol Pot regime in Cambodia. Because basically what it means is liquefy everyone who has a brain, anyone who is educated, anyone who's middle or upper class. Because their idea is start fresh. And the idea was the only people who are able to change are students and proletariat, the lower class. And so I would say to them, oh, well, what about Lenin? Wasn't he part of the aristocracy? Anyway, but one of the things that really turned me off was that they figured that only certain people were capable of change. So that was, to me, was against them. The second thing was I noticed that, and because I was privy to sort of the inner workings, is these guys were just as warped, corrupt, whatever word you want, as anyone else. They were just as power hungry, just as wanting their own way, just as disrespectful to other people, and just as abusive as anyone. So there was a bunch of girls that were sort of hangers-on to this group. Well, the guys in leadership would use and abuse them just like anyone else. You know, if you have the caricature of engineers being great womanizers, well, these guys were pretty good. You know, and so, you know, you'd have young girls who thought they were in love with some guy, and the guy would just use them and dump them. I'm thinking, these are revolutionaries who are trying to make the world a better place, and they're treating their own friends this way? So that turned me off. And the other thing is coming to Christianity, because I came to Christianity around this time, is what Christianity says is everyone has a chance. Everyone can make a difference. No matter who you are, you can make a difference. In other words, and I remember going back to some of the Maoists and saying, you know, you have a problem. Your revolution is too small. The Christian revolution says that everyone can take part. Everyone's important. No one's left out. These poor Maoists would sort of like, like, well, and I great fun because they'd to me, my way of thinking was that they were sort of convenient revolutionists, because they'd come to me and said, well, Mike, can I offer you a smoke? I says, no, I don't smoke. Well, how come? Well, I said, it's a waste of money for the revolution. And they'd say, does that mean you don't drink either? I said, same thing. It's a waste of money for the revolution. And speaking their language. And the guy says, you know, Mao Tse-tung would like that, you know. But, I mean, these guys were sort of fair weather revolutionists. I mean, it was nice sitting in Edmonton in the summer where you don't have to worry about anything. But if you were in somewhere else, you might. So from there, I was a fairly short sort of period of time with them. But coming and discovering what the Christian faith was about, I said, you know, that's what you guys have got is just too small.
So back then you thought the world needed fixing.
Yeah. Still does.
But how did you get? What was it about communism that drew you in?
Well, it was, see, when I drew me in, it wasn't so much, I mean, I didn't even know it was communism until I got involved in the leadership. And actually most people that got involved probably didn't know. I mean, it's well, you might say, I mean, I don't know the background of Black Lives Matter. But just do an analogy with Black Lives Matter is, do the people who show up for the demonstrations
Fully understand where it's rooted in?
exactly?
Probably not.
Do they know who the leadership is? Do they know who it started?
Do you know who the leadership is?
Well, I know there's 2 or 3 women, but you know. So with SDU, I mean, so you'd go to a demonstration, and there would be someone up on a platform busy yelling, shouting, you know, spouting something or other. And interesting thing is, this is one of the things I hate about sort of crowd scenes, is you'd have someone up there haranguing the crowd, and then you'd hear a voice over here and maybe a voice over here sort of echoing that thought or, you know, responding to it. But I discovered later, those people out in the audience were plants.
We're plants.
Yeah, they were plants. They were part of the organization. See a little old lady, you know, respond, and you think, oh, well, that must be genuine. She was part of it. She was a plant. And so, you know, you have that person, this person, this person, this person. Well, it raises the tenor, the emotional pitch of it. More and more people get involved who aren't even part of it. Before you know it, you're caught up. And I've seen that even in legitimate political conventions, the same kind of stuff. Not Marxist or communist at all. Same kind of thing. I've seen it in conservative conventions.
Well, I that's messed up. That's messed up. But the more you research things, well, if it works for communism, it'll work for conservatism or liberalism or whatever ism you want to put there.
Yeah.
Whatever you want to put anywhere. There's been enough documentaries come out these days that talk about things like that.
Well, I mean, and the thing is, it's so easy, you know, easy to raise. You know, well, I mean, this is problem with some of our politicians is if you raise enough the flags, and you know, the right slogans and appeal to the right base, you can get lots of people on your side, whether they realize what you're about or not.
So is it hard, coming from all that you've seen?
Mm-hmm.
Isn't it hard to like flick on the TV and watch any of what's going on right now, just to know that a lot of what you've just talked about is going on day by day? Any which organization you want to throw it at, you can just see that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, I mean, and even not just even TV. I mean, I won't go into any details, but I mean, in this and other communities of sort of, you know, being aware of something happening and thinking, okay, what's the rest of the story? What's really behind this? You know, we see the headline, we see the coverage on TV, whatever, but that's not the whole story. There's something else more to it. And unfortunately, very seldom does the whole story get out. You know, sometimes there's some real skullduggery, some graft, some selfishness that's in behind that never gets exposed. You know, well, I'll give you one example. There was in Saskatoon, there was a big hullabaloo about the expansion of a golf course. And, you know, of course, you know, all sorts of things get trotted off, like, oh, what about the environment? It's going to hurt this or that or whatever. Guess what? That was a red herring. The real reason for the hullabaloo about the golf course was it was going to threaten the view of somebody's acreage. That's what it all was about. And he enlisted all this support.
Because people don't dig and find out what it's actually about.
Yep.
Why? Have you ever thought about that? Why is that? Why do people not dig? You see it. Social media has become a prime target for that.
Yeah. Well, sometimes it's laziness. Sometimes it's not wanting to be, a shit disturber. I mean, I've seen things even in Lloydminster that I'm surprised that the press never investigated. I mean, if I was in the press, I would have right away. But then on the other hand is, okay, do you get a reputation for attacking the big boys? Do you want a reputation for uncovering a mess? Or do you just let it slide?
I don't have the answer to that question. I just think there's a reason why I like this. This is the full story, right? If the tagline was "Pastor is a communist," think of the amount of clickbait that would be. And maybe that's what we'll do. We'll put it as "Pastor." That way they can hear the whole thing.
Yeah,
But as far as that question of do you want to be a shit disturber and worry about wrestling with the big boys, the big boys, it's more are you putting yourself in a position of harm or possible things that you don't want to happen?
Well, yeah.
That would be the concern, in my opinion. But
well, I mean, and true. I mean, and let's say the media did take on some of these juicy stories. What might happen? I mean, we already know that in the States that certain media get labeled for this one direction or another, and that undoubtedly means something in terms of their advertisers.
Oh, yeah.
So if you're the only newspaper in town and you expose something that unsavory going, what's that going to do? Is it going to increase your readership, or is it going to lose you some advertisers?
Follow the money. The Washington Redskins, right? They're changing their name, right? They're the Washington football team now.
Yeah.
And for years and years and years and years, they hold out. They had lots of people upset about their name. So now they've changed their name. Well, what changed? And you find out the people that support the team told them they were going to pull their money.
Yeah.
It had has nothing to do with whether or not they believe Redskin was derogatory or not, right?
Yeah.
And people can make up that choice for their own. Well, take the Eskimos. It has nothing to do with them wanting to change the bloody name. It has everything to do with the money.
Yeah. And coming back to the Trotskyists for a moment. Before I got involved, I had no idea that they were Trotskyists or all communists. Here was a group of people who wanted to make a difference, who wanted some change, and to me that was the key thing.
It was a noble cause almost.
Yeah. Right? And so the fact of what their political affiliation was, that wasn't the key thing to start with. And then once I discovered what they were really like, then I dumped them. But
yeah. You got into the inner workings and saw what was going on and where it was leading, and you're like,
yeah. And I would say with the Black Lives Matter, okay, at least one or more of the leaders may have a Marxist background, or that's what I've read anyway. But is that the sort of important thing, or is the important thing trying to agitate for some changes in terms of how visible minorities are looked after? I really don't think that a Marxist revolution is going to go anywhere in the United States. But in terms of agitating for some changes in the way that things are handled, hopefully there will be some changes. So to me, it's not sort of the background that's so important. It's what the end result is. I mean, and to me, this is the sad thing. I mean, over the years, there's been tons of demonstrations in the States in terms of, blacks or other minorities, and then what's happened.
Nothing.
Nothing.
Or, wow, I shouldn't say nothing. That isn't exactly right, but not as much as one would like to believe.
Yeah.
I say that right?
Yeah. I mean, you hear of states that are, trying things in terms of voter suppression. Well, that shouldn't be happening, but it does. So maybe the present agitation make a difference, but who knows? That's where I'm glad I'm a Canadian, where individual provinces don't get to decide how voters are registered. It's one system for all of Canada.
There'd be a lot of people, though, that are upset with the way the current, I'll say this, going into the political sphere here, but I haven't been very happy with our current leader. He's not at the top of my list.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, somehow, across all of Canada, he's still got a lot of people that enjoy what he's doing.
Well, and frankly, I don't know whether any of the alternatives would have handled it anything differently.
I can't.
Yeah. I mean, I think we still would be badly in debt. I think we'd still have the COVID crisis.
What do you think of the COVID crisis?
I think it's for real.
You've been on this planet a lot longer than I have. There's never been anything quite like it.
Not since 1918.
But even with the Spanish flu, you had a war going on then, and they didn't shut down everything to try and.
They did. The flu came to here after the war, and they shut down churches and businesses and schools, quarantine all over the place, Now the thing I haven't found is how long that was. So I haven't found out how long it was and what the sort of after effects was. But I mean, obviously the country bounced back. That was 1918, 1919. And actually the second or third outbreaks of the Spanish flu were worse than the first.
Yeah, well, let's not say that too loud. Let's knock on some wood.
Yeah.
Right?
But I mean, they didn't have anywhere, they didn't understand the nature of epidemics and flu and that kind of thing. And their medical practice was nowhere as good as we have it. Plus, on top of that, the other thing, well, this is even worse, is often the deaths were almost overnight.
Yeah.
A person would be healthy one day and dead the
and
next.
gone the next. Well,
You know.
and they had other things. I mean, you had a world war going on.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I mean, we didn't know. I mean, the disease was spread in Canada and the United States by troops coming back. So I mean, they didn't. I mean, in the trenches of Europe, they had censorship, and so the fact that people were getting sick and dying didn't get out there. The reason that it was called the Spanish flu
is because the Spanish talked about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas in the Allies and the Axis didn't talk about it. So if their guys died, well,
yeah.
So what? But I mean, so when the troops came back, I mean, you drop off some people in Brandon and people in Winnipeg and people in Regina.
Yeah. Well, it's no different than how this one spread, right?
But yeah.
I mean, this one spreads because the entire world is so tightly traveled now. Like, I mean, you can get to anywhere, and everybody is going everywhere.
Yeah. So it just spread across Canada, and they didn't shut down provinces or anything. I mean, they did have quarantines and shut down schools and businesses and such, but it was already spread.
I've seen the signs from, I want to say it was Kelowna. Don't quote me on that, but I've seen the signs from back in those days where they had limited on gatherings down to, I think it was like 7 people, if memory serves me correct, and things like that. Yeah, I definitely saw that.
Yeah. So I'd like to hear more about sort of the after effects and where they went from that. But so far I haven't found it. But yeah. But I mean, I've had parishioners with it. I mean, I had a fellow in the hospital that was 93 years of age. He was in the hospital for something else. Well, his roommate got COVID. And so, and he didn't even know that this fellow had COVID. And so here's this 93-year-old, picks it up as well. He's tested 3 different times and found to be positive all 3 times. I mean, how worrisome is that? Or we had a guy from the men's shelter who's a diabetic and had to go into the hospital every week for his shot. He goes in there on a Tuesday. They announce on Wednesday that they have 13 cases of COVID in the hospital. He's just been there. He's vulnerable. Next day he comes down with symptoms. This is at the men's shelter. You know, the guys aren't socially isolated there. They're not, they weren't at that point anyway. Talk about worried. Fortunately, he came back negative. But they had known since Sunday that there was positive cases there. And yet he was there on Tuesday and they said nothing. Or 2 people from Carol's church were tested positive, and as far as I know, it was from a restaurant that they went to. Which is interesting because apart from that, the fellow is an agricultural worker. I mean, he's just not in town very much. She's at home. So it's alive and with us,
It's a very strange thing.
Yeah. Anyway, any more questions you have for me? No, we got into tangents. By the way, Carol is Nosy Parker, if there ever was. She says, "Is this going to be on TV? Is there going to be can we watch this, or is it going to be recorded so we can hear it somewhere?"
Well, for sure, the Lloydminster Archives are going to have it stored away for future generations if somebody ever wants to go down this rabbit hole with us.
Yeah.
No, it's been a very interesting chat. I wasn't sure what I was getting when they said I was going to have a pastor come. I was like, oh, all right. Sure. We can talk about life in a minute. But you've thrown that on its side 100%. I mean, when I think about what we've talked about a lot of different things that have been extremely interesting. And your travels have, well, you've lived a life. That is for sure.
Yeah.
Is there anything you'd like to talk about that we haven't brought up? You've mentioned a lot of different things.
Well, I'll give you a teaser. As I mentioned, this is what my book that I'm working on. George Exton Lloyd, founder of our community, namesake. By the way, I hope Archives doesn't have to deal with none of this. But both Barr and Lloyd were, in today's terms, racists, most definitely. Because the Barr colony was meant as a colony for British and no one else, to the point where the federal government would offer them agricultural advisors to help the farmers, and they would turn them down unless they were either Brits or Canadians from Eastern Canada. So if the federal government offered us agricultural experts from the Dakotas or Montana, they were turned down because they were American. They wanted...
You say that we might, hopefully they never have to deal with it, but isn't it Isn't it absolutely absurd to try and hold people to the standards of today? Like you go.
Oh, it is. I mean,
you go
and-
deeper in. Everybody back at some point was probably racist because that's times of the.
Well, I mean, that's something that Carol and I talk about quite a bit, and my brother and I talk about quite a bit, is revisionism, is using today's standards for someone in times past.
Well, go back 100 years. I mean, yeah, the times were different.
Well, I mean, and John A. Macdonald or Ryerson or Sifton or, the various people that are getting lambasted today, that was a different world, different values.
What did you think of them yanking the statue down?
Stupid. I mean, sure. For one thing, I mean, I really wonder if the people who did that have read history.
Most certainly not.
And particularly any sort of nuanced sense of history. Like, okay, so why the reservations, for instance? Well, if you delve into the history, you discover that the reservations were designed as a way of, I mean, this may not be the only reason, but one of the reasons was a way of protecting the First Nations people. Because prior to that, individual First Nations, Métis and Indians were given land script. And then unscrupulous outsiders, whites, would bargain it away from them, would gyp them out of their land script. And that's what happened in the Winnipeg area, in the Red River area, is that they would be gypped. There would be scoundrels who would get them away from them. Because the First Nations and Métis did not understand the land system and did not understand what these unscrupulous people were up to. And so the First Nations people would lose out on their land. And so one of the reasons for the reservations was to preserve a land base for the First Nations that could never be taken away from them. So no matter what happened, that would be theirs. So it was a way of protecting them.
Once again, trying to help.
Yeah. And even the residential schools. The idea, I mean, my father went to a residential school, except in Britain they call it a boarding school. But it was, the idea of a boarding school was to equip you for life, a certain kind of life, and to indoctrinate you into that way of life. Now in Britain, it was to educate you to become a proper English gentleman. Well, the founders of the residential schools thought, and we may say that they're wrong, but they thought the only way that the First Nations people are going to survive in Canada is to adopt a European lifestyle, a lifestyle, education, etc., etc. And so they need to be indoctrinated away from their culture and their language and become Europeans. Well, we can say, oh, that was benighted, that is to losing them their identity, but that was the understanding of the people who designed it, is that they need to become like us. And sad to say, but pretty well every nation in the world thinks that their civilization is better than anyone else. I mean, the Japanese still feel that way. The Chinese still feel that way about themselves. People in India feel that way, that their civilization is better than others. Pretty well every nation in the world thinks that they're better. I mean, think of certain people in the United States think that they're better. That's part of the human condition. We on the prairies think we're better.
You certainly do.
And we know we are. But I mean, so for Ryerson and others to say, you need to become, darker skinned Europeans, that was their belief, that their belief was education was the way. Well, I mean, Carol's a teacher. We say, well, if the First Nations people don't have education, where are they? What would happen to our First Nations people if they were still subsisting solely on trap lines or on bison that don't exist anymore? So I mean, the problem is, so we read history in terms of today's values. Well, it don't work that way.
Yeah, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah. Anyway, coming back to
Yes,
George
your book.
Exton Lloyd, one of his ideas, remember this was to be an English colony, was to plant an Anglican church within 6 miles of every settler. Because the idea was St. John's was to be the mother church, or that's what Minster means. It was to be the mother church, and then there was all sorts of satellite churches out there. So there's, in the county of Vermilion River, there's probably 12 to 14 churches that used to exist. Same thing on the Saskatchewan side. So the idea, within 6 miles of every settler, so that by horse and buggy or by horse, you could get to church, easily. This is before roads were decent. And furthermore, what George Exton Lloyd came up with was a set of plans that for $250, you got a package to build a church. And so if you look at the old churches, they're all the same.
All identical.
Yeah. So if with an experienced carpenter as a foreman and a bunch of farmers, you could build a church. So there was one fund for churches, $250, another fund for horse and buggies, and another for clergy. And so they brought over 50, I think it was around 50 men originally, that would be potential clergy. So George Exton Lloyd had the vision of what he called the Saskatchewan plan of planting these churches all over the place to provide religious home for his settlers. And at that point in time, the southern parts of the province, Regina, Coppell, that area, the railway had been there earlier, and so there was church presence was there, not just Anglican but others as well. But this area was brand new when the bar colonists came here. So George Exton Lloyd's idea was, okay, let's be first off the ground and do our thing. So that's why.
So now you're writing a book about this.
Yeah. And it's fascinating. You've got the story of Tango flags, interesting story. There's a story of one day in 1914, I think it was, one tornado destroyed 3 churches.
In this area?
Yeah. Lone Rock, Fartown, and Southminster. Southminster is where Wickham's nursery is. So 3 churches in one day. And I think it was either that day or the next day, or very close to it, was when the Regina cyclone happened. It was a bad week.
No kidding.
You have another church that got stolen and then stolen back.
Stolen.
How
do you mean stolen?
People came with
a truck and loaded it up and took it away.
Well, that was before a truck. It was a team of oxen or horses and
stole a church.
Yeah, moved it. Moved it, probably 20 miles. and then the local people stole it back again. Well, didn't have to steal it back because it had fallen into disuse in the new location, so they took it back again, moved it back.
Well, I look forward to seeing the book when it's done.
Yeah. Anyway, it's great fun,
Yeah, going back through history and finding, the architectural plan of the church system here around Lloydminster.
And the story of some of the early settlers, early settlers and early clergy, like for instance, the system was they would have these new ministers in outlying areas to be trained up, and then they had a supervising pastor who would make the rounds and help them. So anyway, at one point it was an Archdeacon Trench, George Trench, and the story is that he was quite a horseman. That one account says he drove like Jehu. Jehu's a guy in the Old Testament that's quite notorious. Anyway, turns out that Archdeacon Trench had originally been with the British Hussars in the Boer War. No wonder he was quite a horseman. He also was noted in one of the histories for his rather eloquent vocabulary for addressing oxen. He hated oxen, and I gather his vocabulary in addressing wayward oxen was quite something, quite rich.
Well, we'll say it once again. I look forward to when you finish your project and getting a chance to look through it.
Yeah.
Furthermore, I really enjoy you coming in and sitting here and telling some stories and everything else about your life. Kept you just shy of 2 hours, so we should probably cut it off right there. But once again, thanks for coming in and doing this.
Well, you're welcome. Yeah.
Hey, folks, thanks for joining us today. If you just stumbled on the show, please click subscribe. Then scroll to the bottom and rate and leave a review. I promise it helps. Remember, every Monday and Wednesday, we will have a new guest sitting down to share their story. The Sean Newman Podcast is available for free on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and wherever else you get your podcast fix. Until next time. Hey, Keeners. Hope you enjoyed that ride. That was there was a lot in there. And, well, I hope you guys have a great week. If you're the champ, and it's Wednesday, and you got your feet up on the desk, and you're thinking about said Pilsner that you're about to have, maybe invite your coworker over, because maybe he wants to have a said Pilsner. That's just what I'm saying. Anyways, have a great week, guys. We will catch you Monday, all right?